Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we will be looking at the 1980 sequel to one of the greatest kung fu movies of all time. Starring once again the legendary Gordon Liu and its director Lau Kar-long, can these two manage to capture lightning in a bottle for a second time? We'll certainly find out today as we take a look at Return to the 36 Chambers. The story opens on a fabric dyeing mill, where its workers have recently noticed the quality of their dyes seems to have dropped significantly. At the same time, the factory owner Wang announces he's hired a bunch of Manchu to bring the quality back up, and will be garnering the workers' wages in order to pay them. Wow, not suspicious timing at all. Of course, the factory workers are really pissed at this and even try to quit under the guidance of the foreman. But they don't get very far as the Manchus beat the crap out of anybody who tries to protest their unfair treatment. Later on, while they're in a tea house discussing their problems, the workers are overheard by Jen Chu, the foreman's younger brother and local con man with a heart of gold. Despite his bumbling nature, his rather convincing monk persona gives the foreman's assistant, Ah Chu, no, really, and one other lady dyer the idea of how to intimidate the Manchu into reinstating their full salaries. They want Jen to pretend to be the legendary Shaolin's head abbot of the 36th Chamber, San Te. With the help of the other workers, Jen is surprisingly able to successfully intimidate the Manchu for a short time. But almost just as quickly, Boss Wang is able to determine that he's an imposter and drives Jen away, while his Manchu thugs retaliate against the workers harder than ever before. Feeling guilty for everything that's happened, Jen declares that he will gain real strength and makes his way to the legendary Shaolin Temple to learn Kung Fu. Easier said than done, as Jen's every attempt to enter is thwarted by the vigilant monks, who aren't falling for his usual con man tricks. Eventually, Jen is able to sneak into the temple grounds, only to be confronted with the real San Te.
I heard what you were saying. You know nothing of my work.
He too initially refuses to train Jen in the martial arts, but after seeing Jen's continued persistence and constant begging, San Te agrees to give him a chance, one chance, under a single condition. He must first construct a series of scaffolding around the entire Shaolin Temple. Will this be enough to train the bumbling con man and save the dye mill workers? Only time will tell. The 36th Chamber poses an interesting dilemma. How do you create a sequel to a movie where the main character's story was pretty much wrapped up by the end of the original? This may have been the very question that was on director Lau Kar-long's mind when the Shaw brothers came asking for a follow-up to the mega hit of Enter the 36 Chambers. In crafting this sequel, the filmmakers came up with an innovative compromise. Gordon Liu would continue to be the star of the movie, but recast as a comedic loser who trains under the first film's protagonist, San Te, now played by Li King-chu. It also adds a healthy dose of humor to the film, which turns out to be the winning combination for this movie. Overall, The Return to the 36 Chambers is a fun-filled, lighthearted romp that will probably be appreciated by fans of the original as well as newcomers to the franchise. And for that, I give the story 4 out of 5 stars. In general, the more comedic tone of this film did give the actors a lot more opportunities and a wider range for characterization. And this is especially true for Gordon Liu's character of Jen Chu. Having Gordon Liu play the star role while being a completely different character, while also continuing the story from the previous film, could be seen as a risky decision given how much it depends on Gordon Liu's actual chops as an actor. But as it turns out, it worked out brilliantly because this guy's got acting talent for days. His characterization of Jen Chu and the stark departure it was from his previous role as San Tae shows that this guy's got much more range as an actor than you'd previously think. It's also kind of meta and hilarious to see Gordon Liu play a con man who at one point is pretending to be his character that he was depicting in the previous film.
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
Both the antagonist, side characters, and even our main lead are a notable upgrade from the original film. In fact, all the acting in this movie is pretty much stellar. That is, of course, with one exception, one horrifying exception. And that, of course, being the character of Ah Chu. Yes, this horrifying freak of nature, with his big mole, unibrow, and terrifying buck teeth, is the foreman's assistant. He's also Jen Chu's best friend, a bumbling dye worker, and the driving force of the plot through the entire film. Seriously, this guy is the instigator of half the story's action, and it makes no sense. He's the only character who has these makeup effects. No one else does, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why. Is he like a trope in theater that I don't understand? Is he some sort of racist depiction? Because he feels racist. This feels very racist. But no one who worked on this film has ever talked about this. No one who's seen this film can figure out what the deal is. He's just there with those horrible buck teeth. The best explanation I can think of is that the actor, for whatever reason, thought that it was funny. And the idea that someone did this just for shits and giggles and no other reason kind of makes it loop around to almost being funny. That is, if it wasn't so horrifying. So terribly horrifying. Ugh. Despite this, if you remove this one aspect for the movie, the performances on display would be perfect. And for that reason, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Now, in general, I'd say the special effects of this movie are about on par with most other Shaw Brothers productions made at the time. In fact, a lot of these scenes, especially the temple ones, might have the same sets as the first movie, with the notable addition of scaffolding all around it. What this construction does for the movie is help to distinguish it both from the first film and a lot of other wushu films, while providing a lot of comedic and athletic opportunity for the character. I have, however, heard a rumor that perhaps the scaffolding was included because the sets were still largely under construction when this movie was being filmed, and they had to incorporate it into the plot out of necessity. However, given how important it is to the overall story and how well it shows off Gordon Liu's polearm talents, I'd say that its addition was pretty intentional. The same cannot be said, however, for the makeup and costume design of this film. Now, you think the main impetus of this problem would come from the character of Ah Chu and those terrible, terrible buck teeth. But he's the only character in the movie that actually has this costuming, and weirdly enough, it's way better than the makeup for a lot of the other characters. I mean, blood and bruise effects are basically painted on. All of these costumes look like they were torn out of another movie, and the less I say about the wigs, the better. In fact, the thing that points out the problem with the costuming and makeup the most is the fact that Jen as a character does have these effects that are supposed to look bad. They're supposed to point out how terrible his disguises are. However, these wigs and dots, the bad ones, look about on par with the ones that are supposed to be good, which says a lot about the special effects budget of this film. All in all, while the sets are immaculate for this movie, the makeup and costume design really brings down the special effects, and thus I can't give it any more than 3 out of 5 stars. Now, there isn't much I can say about the quality for Return to the 36 Chambers that I haven't already said about the original. Though not as influential as the first, it's still almost as easy to find. Though I will admit, the English dubbing for this film, at least the version I saw, is a little bit confusing and can make the plot kinda hard to follow. If you're gonna go watch this movie, I would suggest finding the subbed version with the original audio, since it's a little bit more cohesive and the sound quality is slightly better. Overall, 4 out of 5 stars. Now, this might just be my personal bias, but I think the Kung Fu in this film is even better than in the original. For one thing, there are just more fights to look at. And while yes, I will admit, you don't necessarily need to be fight focused for a Kung Fu movie to be good, having a lot of kick-ass action certainly doesn't hurt either. The other part of this is the fact that we get all of this additional fighting kung fu action without losing anything that made the first movie great. In the original Enter the 36 Chambers of Shaolin, the plot along with the action was weirdly kind of sectioned off. It felt like every 30 minutes you were kind of watching a different movie, while in Return to the 36 Chambers has a much more comprehensive plot and cohesive action throughout. Not to mention, there's a great variety of Kung Fu on display. Not just kick-ass action, not just kick-ass montages, but slapstick and pratfalls. And all of this is greatly enhanced by the variety of sets and props incorporated into the Kung Fu. In addition, everything that's introduced has a very satisfying payoff later in the movie. The coloring sticks, for instance, that are originally used by the Manchu to beat up on all the dye workers are eventually turned against them. And when Jen incorporates the twine he originally used to tie scaffolding together into his rooftop kung fu, he later uses it offensively to tie his enemies together. All of this is very satisfying and hilarious to watch. But the fight that really takes the cake in this film happens at the end. At the climax of the movie, when Jen finally confronts the big boss Wang and all of his minions for the final showdown. And then, for no reason, these evil dudes decide to show up to the fight with the most heinous of kung fu weapons ever imaginable. Chairs!
They're not just tricks. They're the real thing. Not bad.
Yeah, that's right, the villains, for no reason and with no setup whatsoever, decide to show up to this, the penultimate battle, with folding chairs. And they are weirdly competent at using them. Honestly, it makes the film so much more hilarious to think about these guys practicing their folding chair fu off screen somewhere, just waiting for the day that they get to use it. And while this fight does feel kind of out of place, as it even looks like it was filmed for a different movie, and how abruptly the film itself ends after it's over, it's still a fantastic addition to the overall film. Combine all this, and I say the Kung Fu in this movie is contender for some of the top 10 Kung Fu flicks of all time. And for that, I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. Alright, it's time to tally up all the points and see where Return to 36 Chamber stacks up. And the final score is... Wow, 20 out of 25. That's a pretty damn good score and a marked improvement from the first movie. Come see us again where we review the final film in the trilogy of the 36 Chambers, and perhaps the most divisive one of the bunch. I'm Theo Y. Happy holidays to you and a Merry Kung Fu Christmas.